Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 159 of my daily marketing podcast, The Edward Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be an exciting episode. This is going to be a two-part episode about how Stripe got its first customers, and it is a great story. This comes from one of my favorite newsletters. This newsletter is called First 1000. I've been reading this newsletter for years. It's by this guy. He now works doing conversion rate optimization at Duolingo. His name is Ali Abulata. And I found First 1000 many years ago on Product Hunt. It was originally a newsletter about how companies got their first 1,000 customers and users. And now it's transitioned into a newsletter about conversion rate optimization. And one of its first newsletters, this may have even been its first, was about Stripe. And because it was the first newsletter, Ali put a ton of work into it. And the work shows because it is a great story and a very long story. And so I'm going to break this up into two consecutive episodes, two consecutive parts. Today will be part one of how Stripe got its first customers and first users. And tomorrow will be part two. So sit back or walk or do the dishes or whatever you do when you listen to my show. Relax and get ready to feel motivated because Stripe's story is very good. I'm going to start with the introduction from Stripe's story on the First 1000 newsletter. The introduction is, this case study is on Stripe. I'm not sure about you, but I have yet to meet someone who doesn't like Stripe. And it is a little bizarre. Sure, they build a great product and all, but when a company hits that scale, when a company is worth $90 billion plus dollars, there's gotta be a hater or two out there. Stripe is not just a Silicon Valley darling. It's a media darling, a developer darling, a creator darling. It's like the Oprah of tech companies. And who on earth doesn't like Oprah? And then there's the Oprah meme with her fingers out, with her arms out, and she's going, you get a merchant account, you get a merchant account, you get a merchant account, everybody gets a merchant account. So I went on a quest this week to uncover the Stripe story. So this was sent, when was this sent? This was April 25th of, maybe it was 2021. This might have been April 25th, 2021. And so Ali continues, I went on a quest this week to uncover the Stripe story, how they got started, how they got their early customers, and how the heck did they build such fanfare in an excruciatingly dull industry. The only thing more boring than payment gateways is doing your taxes, and I don't see anybody raving about TurboTax. Patrick and John were a little bit busy this week to talk to yours truly, so I had to do some digging, a lot of digging. Let's jump into the fun stuff. So that's the introduction to this. We're jumping in now. Let's start from the very, very beginning. And there's an image of Patrick Collison. He's holding a trophy above his head. The reigning champ, the notorious geek, the one, the only, deep voice, Patrick Collison. That's the caption. In 2005, 16-year-old Patrick Collison, Patrick is the founder of Stripe, did what many high school nerds do and participated in the Young Scientist of the Year competition. Unlike in other parts of the world where people build volcanoes and stuff, this competition was the shit in Ireland. Like, a lot of notable tech breakthroughs came out of there. Okay, so why is that important? Patrick won the competition, but in retrospect, for someone who built a $95 billion company in his 20s and early 30s now, that should come as no surprise. The important bit was that during the competition, Patrick first encountered the programming language Common Lisp. Lisp was created by Paul Graham, one of the co-founders of Y Combinator. Throughout his time in the competition, Patrick spent a lot of time contributing to Lisp. As a young teen, he leveraged it to build his app Isaac, his entry to the competition. Isaac is what we would call today a chatbot. In 2005, chatbots were not a thing, and building one with some basic machine learning running in the background was enough to grant him the winning prize. Patrick moves to the US to attend MIT. After winning the competition, Patrick was admitted to MIT at 17 years old, 1.5 years before finishing high school. Talk about being smart. His brother John, who is 2 years younger, was at something called Activation Year. Activation year is an Irish concept where students take a year off between middle and high school to explore, well, life. Students are expected to get some work experience or travel or contribute to society in some shape or form because there is more to life than just your grades. As a student, and Ali wrote this, as a student, I approve this message. I approve that too. Moving back to Ireland, in his activation year, John started tinkering around with the idea of creating a better eBay. The idea was to create a mix of Wikipedia plus eBay. Patrick, being a good brother, decided to lend him a hand. After the first quarter of his freshman year at MIT, Patrick gained so much conviction in this project that he moved back to Ireland to be with his little brother and continue working on the project full-time and dropped out of MIT. Technically, he took a leave of absence, getting into Y Combinator and moving to Silicon Valley. Even though Patrick was 17 and John was only 15, they got accepted into the fourth ever batch of Y Combinator. This is Y Combinator 07. The only reason Patrick and John, two teenagers from rural Ireland, knew anything about Y Combinator was because of Patrick's involvement with Lisp during his science competition the year prior. I would guess that getting to know Paul Graham and a few of the key contributors to the language had a thing or two to do with how they managed to get into Y Combinator. Their app Shupa ended up merging with another Y Combinator company as soon as they joined. The combined company was named Octomatic, and the brothers got back to working hard. Octomatic and becoming teen millionaires, March 2008. The ambition for Octomatic was to build the next eBay. Still, they started off with tools that help individual sellers on sites as eBay, Amazon, Overstock, and others manage their listings. In 2008, eBay was all the rave, and within a few months of launching, the Octomatic team got their first acquisition offer. They were young and naive, and they thought they had a much larger vision, so they didn't entertain it, but over the next 3 months, they got 4 to 5 more offers, and the teens caved in. I guess everyone has a price. They sold the company 11 months in for $5 million. According to media gossip from 2008, each of the Collison brothers netted around $1.2 million from that deal and overnight became self-made teen millionaires. The return to normal. In case you weren't already feeling bad about yourself, I know I was, let me remind you that John Collison became a millionaire at 15 during his gap year and went back to Ireland to start his high school. Patrick, on the other hand, moved to Canada to work as the director of engineering at Live Current Media, the public company that acquired Octomatic. Patrick spent a year in Canada. Maybe that was a part of the deal. Maybe not. We will never know. After the year ended, Patrick decided to re-enroll at MIT and officially start his second year. Since he joined university 1.5 years younger than everyone else, he figured he wasn't in a real rush to graduate. Stripe, the first lines of code, October 2009. So at the age of 19, after going to MIT, then back to Ireland, then to San Francisco, then to Canada, and finally back to MIT, gotta respect the hustle, Patrick started working on the first version of Stripe. To be fair, though, he was working on so many different things at the time. After going through the roller coaster of founding and selling a company in less than a year and encountering sort of a normalcy of being a student, the guy just had to tinker away. I guess MIT was too boring for him. Patrick was working on hacking an offline version of Wikipedia for the iPhone before Apple allowed apps on the App Store, plus a better web framework for Common Lisp. During that time, Patrick became obsessed with SliceHost. SliceHost is something like AWS before AWS existed. I mean, AWS was technically available in 2009, but it was nowhere near as user-friendly as it is today. SliceHost allowed developers to set up hosting using a beautiful GUI, at least according to 2009 standards. Patrick used SliceHost for all of his side projects, and the guy was absolutely starstruck with it. There wasn't an aha moment for Stripe. Sure, creating merchant accounts was hard and archaic at the time, but monetizing side projects wasn't top of mind for the teen millionaires. It was just this fascination with the new phenomenon of building an abstraction layer around something so boring and complicated, as was the case with SliceHost, and turning it into something that is intuitive and easy to use that excited Patrick. He figured he could replicate the SliceHost model for payments. Hacking away at Buenos Aires, winter break, January 2010. In a parallel universe, John completed his high school back in Ireland and received the highest score ever in the country's history. It should come as no surprise that John got admitted into Harvard, and so the duo were both in the US doing boring school stuff and primed for round 2 of building a company together. Leading up to the winter break, the Collison brothers applied and got into Y Combinator again and officially received their funding of $20,000 to $30,000 by January 2010. Instead of going through the program, they decided they wanted to hack at it away from all the distractions in the beautiful city of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Actually, my co-founder for one of my projects is going to live in Buenos Aires in January, and I really want to visit. I might go visit Buenos Aires myself. Getting their first user. John hits deploy shortly before Stripe handles its first production payment. Bear in mind, Patrick and John, despite their very young success, still had no freaking clue how the financial industry worked. What they knew was how to code. So what they did was lie. Is it lying if no one asks, though? There was no financial infrastructure in any way for the first 2 years of Stripe. Patrick had a friend working at a payments gateway company. The company's API was pretty horrific to set up and deal with. So Patrick and John created a set of APIs that were a lot easier to use. He abstracted the whole thing to 7 lines of code that any developer could copy and paste in under 1 minute. On the back end, when someone signed up to Stripe, Patrick called up his buddy, gave him the details, and the buddy set up a merchant account for that user. Stripe just turned those APIs into something a bit more comprehensible and faster to implement. It wasn't a payments company or anything at the time. And then there's a picture of the first Stripe website. And the hero text is payment processing done right. The first customer of Stripe was a friend of Patrick and John from the early Y Combinator days, Ross Butcher. Ross was the founder of a web software development company named 280 North. He also became the first employee at Stripe. In my book, it's a pretty darn good signal when your first customer leaves their company to join yours after only trying the beta version of your half-baked product. Fun facts. The powerful analytics screenshot was actually from a plane-related mailing list that Patrick subscribed to. It had nothing to do with Stripe. Their pricing page was, quote-unquote, "We're finalizing our pricing right now, will be competitive." The company at the time was named /dev/payments. There is a whole thread about how they came up with the name Stripe. You should check it out. Maybe I'll read that on another episode. Getting the first 20 users. The subsequent 20 users followed suit. All were other Y Combinator companies. There are many arguments about whether you should recruit your first users out of people you know and risk getting sugar-coated feedback, or recruit people you don't know who are just a lot harder to find. Not only did Stripe lean into people they knew, they were also extremely aggressive about it. As Paul Graham outlined in his essay, Do Things That Don't Scale, and this is from Paul Graham now, at Y Combinator we use the term Collison installation for the technique they invented. More diffident founders ask, will you try our beta? And if the answer is yes, they say, great, we'll send you a link. But the Collison brothers weren't going to wait. When anyone agreed to try Stripe, they'd say, right then, give me your laptop, and set them up on the spot. That's from Paul Graham. Pricing as a forcing function. Feedback is crucial in the early days of any company, especially a company attempting to solve such a complex problem like the one Stripe was after. The right feedback could make your business, but the wrong one could be detrimental to the company. Getting candid feedback is tough when all your beta users are your friends and colleagues. Patrick and John decided to price Stripe during beta at the most expensive end of the spectrum, 5% plus 50 cents, when all their competitors were charging 2.9 to 3.2% plus 30 cents. This expensive pricing structure ensured 2 things. People who signed up to Stripe and were willing to bear the expensive costs were not incentivized by money. Money creates all sorts of conflicts and may very well attract the wrong customers. You don't want to be building for the wrong audience ever, but especially not in the early days and not in an industry where product decisions are almost irreversible. It also forced the team to build a great product. The more you charge for your product, the higher the customer's expectations are. Having that pressure from customers asking every day if their offering was truly worth almost 2x what their competitors charge ensured the only way to keep their customers around was to build a product that was at least twice as good as anything out there. And that was not an easy task considering PayPal was one of their main competitors. The next 50 to 100 customers. All right. That's all, actually. That's all for part 1 of how Stripe got its first customers and users. This is episode 159 of The Edward Show. Tune in tomorrow for part 2 of this legendary story. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. I've been enjoying reading it to you, and I will talk to all of you again tomorrow. Bye now.